Hey guys, so I'd like to show you how this drag and drop component works because it's pretty complicated, but it goes over a lot of different features of Svelte and also isn't too hard to make, but it does take a bit of understanding. And it was pretty fun to make, so I want to kind of go over it. So to do this component, what you basically have is the ability to drag these items and drop them into here and also rearrange them. So to get started, I just want to go over the basic structure first. So we're starting off with an array of tasks. Each one has an ID, user, title, description, and a point value. And then we have, and that's the array that renders on the left side. And then we have an empty array that will render on the right side. We're going to bring in Lodash to do some stuff. And then we are bringing in a task component that represents each individual task in the UI. So we have two lists. We have this left side list, which is the to-do list, and this right side list, which is this assigned list. Each one of these is just an each loop over the array, rendering out each task, passing it the task object. So this one's just over here, and this one's on the right side. If you look at the task object itself, this is just simply doing export let of the task, so we can bring it in as a parameter. It's a list item with an ID set, and then we've just got an avatar if it's dropped, and then just some basic styling for the title, description, and the points. So that's just the basic structure of how the tasks worked. So to make the tasks draggable, we actually have to go into the tasks themselves, not the outside pieces, and just set draggable equals to true. And that's all that's required. So I can save that, and now I can move the task around. I can't do anything with it, but I can at least drag it around. All right, now that the items are draggable, next we actually want to highlight this drop zone whenever we drag over it. Okay, so to do that, what we want to do is add a drag enter event over to this div here. So we'll go to that div and we'll say on drag enter equals drag enter. And since we actually have two drag enters, we'll have one for the assign, one for the to do. Let's name this function assigned drag enter, just so we can know the difference. And so I can come up here and say function drag enter, and we can say e colon, and this is a drag event. And then if we just console.log e, we'll get to see the event here. There we go. Let's see if I can increase the size there. Here you can see there's our drag event. Very nice. And that's great, but we need to actually assign a class to this. So we're going to set a new property and say, is dragging over assigned equals true, right? And so we need to go ahead and default that to false. So we can say let equals false. And then we can use this class down here to overtop the whole thing. And we can say class colon ring equals that, and then we can say class colon ring teal 400, these are just tailwind classes, equals the same thing. And so it will turn these two classes on when we're dragging over. And you can see there we get this nice teal, but it doesn't go away is the problem. And so we need to add a drag leave event, so on drag leave, all lowercase, and we can say assign drag leave. And then we can just do the opposite. And so we can come here, make a new thing, boom, and set that to false. All right, so now if we go in and out, and so there we have a nice drop zone highlight from when we drop it. Okay, so now we want to be able to actually move the item over to this other box. And the way we're going to do that is by simply taking the element of the array that we have, so for example this one, and moving it from this array over to this array down here, and then telling Svelte will just re-render it, right? So we just have to know that. So when we're dragging, we have to know which one we're dragging, because we actually don't know that on this page, because all we know is these drop events, and the drop events, they don't know what's been dropped. And so the way we can tell what's been dragging is to be able to put a drag event on the thing that we started dragging with, okay? So what we want to come down here is down to the task. Actually, let's do it in the to-do one because we're coming from the left to the right. And we want to say on drag equals, we can say to-do dragging, right? And then that will fire whenever we're dragging. So we can say function to-do dragging, and then we'll be able to say which one I'm dragging, right? So we can say e colon drag event, and then console.log e so we can see. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. It won't work because the drag event is actually not fired at all. And that's because we haven't passed the drag event through this component. You cannot add drag events directly to components. You have to add them to DOM elements. And so in the task here, we can actually go ahead and pass the event through by doing this on drag. So by doing on drag, now as I drag this, you'll see that I will get all these events flooding in now of what I'm dragging, okay? And now I can know which one I'm dragging because it has an ID that I can identify. So I can say console.log, and it's going to be e.target.getAttribute ID, and we can see what that's going to be, console.log. Oh, I'm already logging it out, but I forgot a parenthesis. Okay, so here, if I log out the ID, you can see I'm dragging ID 1, and here I'm dragging ID 2. And since we know that we're dragging from the to-dos, we can simply say, let's just say const ID equals, that made that way too small. Now we can say ID equals that. We can say const, task equals to-do, tasks to-do dot find task ID equals ID. And then we can say console.log task. All right, so if I do that, you can see now it's getting me the right element, which is fantastic. To fix this TypeScript error, we actually have to cast target as an HTML element so it knows that it has these properties because it doesn't know what it is. So there we go. And now that we have the task, now we can store that and say task dragging equals task. So that will globally let us know which one we're dragging. So I'll come up here and I'll just say let task dragging, which is going to be a type task item. And then it's saying that the find might result in nothing found. So we really want to say if task, then set it. That way it's not ever going to be null here. So now we have task dragging to know what it is we're dragging at any given time. So now that we've done that, the next thing to do will be how do we actually drop it into the next box? Okay, so to move it into the next box, we have to add our drop event finally. So if we come down to the assigned box, we can go ahead and add our drop event. So on : drop equals, we can say assigned drop. And so we'll come up here and just take a look at what that's going to look like. So we can say function assigned drop e and drag event. And we can say console.log dropped. Now we know what we dropped because we know what we were dragging. So we can say task dragging was the one that we dropped. So we can just take a look at that. And if I drag launch tower and I drop it, nothing happens. And that's because when you do drag drop, you have to have a, you have to do the drag over event needs to prevent default. So on drag over equals, we'll just say drag over because we can sort of use this for both. And we're going to say function drag over e : drag event. And we can say e.prevent default. Now that we've done that, now if I drop launch tower, there you go. We got a drop event and we know which one we dropped. There we go. So we are all set up now to move it from one array to the other. So we have the one we want, which is task dragging, and we know which one we're going to, which is assigned. So we can just say assigned tasks assigned dot push task dragging. And there you go. And there you go. Boom. And it's not there. And it's not there because Svelte doesn't know to re-render this. Okay. So you can then just say tasks assigned equals tasks assigned. And that will be as good as a re-render. So put it in there. And there we go. We moved it over. Now, if you don't like doing it this way, you can say tasks assigned equals and then ... tasks assigned and then add tasks dragging to it like that. And that is a one-line way to do the exact same thing. And there you go. Now we moved it over. And that works fine for now. The next thing we need to do is figure out how to remove it from the previous list. We're going to use Lodash because it has a really nice remove method. So _.remove, and you give it the array that you want to remove from. In this case, it's tasks to do, and we want to remove task dragging. So first we'll remove it from that array, and then we'll go ahead and add it to the next one. And if we look at that, we'll be able to say launch tower and drop, and it didn't work. And that's because, same thing as before, we haven't actually told Svelte that we need to re-render this array. So I'll come down here before we're done, and we're just going to set it to itself to sort of tell this one to re-render. So take the launch tower, and there it goes. We've now dragged it out of here and dropped it into here. And if I do that again, we can move countdown, mix fuel, and launch at 0. Now, there's a couple problems with this. While it works, you cannot move them back. We haven't done that. And on top of that, I can't put them in any order. Okay, so we've seen how we can drag stuff over to the right side, but we need to be able to drag it back. And so we need to put all these same events for the other list. So we're going to copy these events and go to the next list here, which was the div here. Let's make this a little cleaner to look at. So we have all these same events. But of course, let's just yeah, that's a little less helpful. Let's do maybe, you know what? I can't use this special shortcut for that because I've got spaces in the class name. Whatever, close enough. All right, so there's that div. Now we don't want assigned drop. We want to do drop, and we want to do drag enter, and then to do drag leave. And then we're going to leave drag over the same because it's just this generic prevent default. So we're going to copy, and don't worry, at the end we're going to make all of these, we're going to make all these similar functions so we don't actually duplicate everything. So we'll say to do drag enter, to do drag leave. We don't have to redo to do dragging. Actually, we do, but we didn't do that one yet, so we'll come back to that one. And this will be to do drop. And so here, this is dragging over to do, is dragging over to do, which we need to add because that doesn't exist yet. So here, let that equal to false. And then to do drop. So here we're going to remove it from the not tasks to do, but tasks assigned. And then here we'll say tasks to do, which will spread. And then tasks to do, tasks. Did I spell it wrong? Let's see. Tasks assigned, tasks to do. No, I don't think I spelled it. Oh, I did spell it wrong. Okay, cool. And then we'll just say tasks assigned equals tasks assigned to sort of reset it. So we'll save that, refresh. So countdown, I can move over, and then I can move it back, and there it goes. Now it drops from here to there, and we can move it back and forth. Now we notice that there's no drop zone effect over here, so we need to add that back. Oh yeah, we'll handle that error in a minute. But we also need to handle the drop effect. So here, the way we did that is we handled it with these class rings here. So we'll do the same thing, and instead of is dragging over assigned, we need to say is dragging over to do, like that. And now we can drag it over and drag it back, and we can get a nice drop zone effect on either case. So there we go. Okay, now the problem remains is, one, I can't drop it on itself. That's a problem. And two, I can't insert it at any particular spot. Okay, so let's address this error that you cannot have duplicate keys in the keyed object. And the reason we're having this error is because when we drop a key, we are not removing it from the one you came from. If you look at our assigned drop, we are only removing it from the to-do list in order to add it here. So if I drop this, let me refresh. If I drop countdown over here, it's fine, right? But if I try to drop it again, we get the error because we only removed it from tasks to do. So a quick way to handle this, an easy way to handle this, is that we can just duplicate this and remove it from both. Now it won't be in both, but it'll try to remove it from both. So we can just say tasks assigned. And then we have to do this for both of the drops. So here's the other drop. So we'll just remove it from both of them. Easy enough, right? Refresh, and then I'll just bring count down over, and I'll drop it again. And now it doesn't have a problem. And that's because it's removing it from either one and then adding it to where I dropped it. So quick way to solve that particular duplicate drop bug. All right, so now we're ready to configure our drag and drop so it drops onto at a specific spot in our list instead of just at the end. Okay, so if we just demonstrate, if we drag countdown over and then drag, launch at 0, I should be able to drop mix fuel between them. It drops to the end here, which is unexpected. Just from a user experience perspective, that's unexpected. And so what we can do here is we can detect when you've dropped over another list item and then insert it at that list item's index. So first, at our drop, let's first take a look at how we can detect whether I've dropped onto the box or onto the list item. So this drag event shows us what we dropped on, and it actually shows us what we dropped on as the element itself. So if I console.log e.target, what you'll notice, so if I drop this on here, first you'll notice this is the whole div. But if I drop a launch tower onto countdown, notice that it is dropping onto the countdown li. So the drag and drop is telling us what we dropped onto, which is very useful because that means that we can now detect that I've dropped onto an li and do something with that one in particular. So it's exactly what we need. So right now, this is inserting at the end. We don't want to do that here. We need to first, determine, thank you, AI, determine the index of the li we dropped on and insert, we're going to do before it, insert before it. So to do that, first things first, we have to detect that. So we'll say if e.target and we can just do node name equals li. Then we can say we've dropped onto that. Now it gets e.target, it doesn't understand. So we're going to say e.target as HTML element is, okay, so that says if this HTML element e.target is an li, that means we've dropped onto a list item. So now we need to figure out which element in our array it is. And we'll do the same technique we did before, which is we'll get the ID and then search for it. So we'll just grab these two lines. So the ID is the attribute. And since we've repeated this, I'm just going to actually copy this out. I'm going to say const drop target equals e.target as HTML element. So I can get rid of doing this twice. We don't like to repeat ourselves. All right, so that's the ID, and then the task. Now we're in assigned drop, which means when we've dropped here, we need to know the index of the assigned one that we're dropping over. So it's actually going to be the tasks assigned and find the right one. So this will be the one, and then we can say const, say like drop target index. We'll call this drop target task. Just be very specific. And then here we can say this is going to be tasks assigned dot index of, and then drop target task. And that should tell us is potentially undefined. Oh, yes, that's right, because it's potentially not a, it's potentially the result of a find. Yeah. All right, TypeScript. All right, so if we had a drop target task, that will give us a drop target index. So let's first log it out and say IDX is drop target index. Let's just verify that. So countdown is the first one in the list. So I'll drop that down, and then I'll put launch tower down. And if I drop it on top of here, it tells us that countdown was at 0. Now I'll drop launch at 0, and I'll drop it onto launch tower. It should give us index 1. So now we're able to vary, and I can just drop this again on countdown, and again it's telling us that countdown is at index 0 in this list. So that's super helpful. So now we know the index, so that we can use splice to add it into that right spot. So we can just say, tasks assigned dot splice, and we can say index at 0 and add the task that we're dragging, right? And then that will insert it at that spot. Okay, now we don't want to do this anymore. We don't want to add it at the end as well. So we'll just say if it's not an li, then we're just going to do what we did before, insert it at the end. Now, if you remember, we had to reset the list here. This technique was to reset the list so that it would still render. Splicing won't re-render it. So we do have to tell it to re-render. So again, we can just say task assigned equals task assigned to tell Svelte to re-render it. And so once we've done this, now I can drop countdown here, and I can drop mix fuel, but now I can put launch at 0. If I'm hovering over mix fuel, it will put it above it. And if I bring launch tower over and put it here, it'll put it above it. Now you can see we've got another bug here where it's no longer removing it from this left side array. So we can take a look at that. All right, so the issue of it leaving a item on this left side is not because we didn't remove it, because we definitely did. The issue is that we haven't told Svelte to re-render the to-do list because we put that in the else statement. So we want to re-render the to-do list as well as the assign list. We want to re-render both lists after we've moved it. So now once we've done that, I can move countdown over, I can move mix fuel over, I can put launch at 0 in the middle here by hovering over this one, and that works great. And I can move launch tower over and put it at the top, and that all works perfectly. And I should be able to move them around. Oh, that's right. I can't move them around yet because I didn't handle dropping in here. I didn't handle dropping in itself. I only handled dropping in the opposite list. So we can handle that next. Okay, so to fix this little bug where when you drag something over and drag another thing over, this bug where I can't drop this down here, countdown, well, if I move launch tower, I can't move countdown back up. And that bug is caused because we failed to add the drag event for assigned. We just completely skipped that earlier. So here you can see we are passing a drag event and calling to do dragging, but we are not doing that down here under this task. So we actually need to take this drag event, drop it here, and instead of to do dragging, we can say assigned dragging. And then we can copy this function here, to do dragging, and add a new one called assigned dragging. And don't worry, we will at the end clean this up so that we don't have repeat functions. Don't you worry. Assigned, or tasks assigned. Okay, so now we're handling properly when we are dragging from the right side, setting the correct task that is dragging. And now that we've done that, now we've fixed this bug where if I drag countdown over, I drag launch tower over, mix fuel, I can now move these around. So mix fuel goes to the top, mix fuel goes to the top, countdown goes to the top, launch tower goes to the top. So as long as we're hovering, it will go to the top. So that's all working correctly now, and I should be able to move them back and move them back over. Okay, so that's all working great. Now the next step is we would like to style it in a way that when I'm hovering over one, it actually shows me like a dotted line above it, showing me where I will be inserting it if I were to drop it. So that'll be the next thing to look at. All right, so the next thing that we want is a style above the list item when we drop over top of it. So if we're hovering over this right now, we would really like to be able to show a line showing where this will be inserted. Because if I hover over it, and based on what we did earlier, if I drop this, it's going to go above it, and we should let the user know that. Now that is going to be completely done in the task itself. So what we need is to be able to say when we start it, when we are over it, when we are not over it anymore, and then when we've dropped it, so we can sort of clear it. So let's start with on drag enter, and we can say equals, just call it drag enter, let a function, drag enter. And what we want to do is we want to set a new property. So like is over another list item, like whatever. And we can just set that to true. So we'll start that off as false. So we say let is over another li equals li equal to false. So on drag enter, that's going to be the case. And when we leave, we want it to no longer be the case. So I'll also add a drag leave event to turn that off. And I'll do that here as well. So drag enter, drag leave, drag leave. So when I leave it, we're going to turn this property off. And when we enter it, we're going to turn this property on. Now, this property, if we come down here, we want it to go ahead and sort of manage these classes. So again, we can use the class directive. So we can say class colon, and we're going to put a bunch of CSS in here. So I'm actually going to drop this in here instead of sort of writing it in front of everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say we're going to add a class for an after element, and it's going to be negative 15 pixels, absolute full width, a dashed border that is sky blue 500. And all of that's going to be turned on. All of these classes will be added when we are dragging over. So let's take a look at that. So if I refresh this, and if I, let's bring our console up to make sure we don't accidentally have an error anywhere. Okay, so I'll put this in here, and then I'll bring Launch Tower over, and you can see if I hover over, I get this nice blue line, and that tells me where it is. Now the blue line has not gone away yet, because when we dropped it, it's still there. So let's quickly fix that. So on drop equals drop, and then I can just, that's going to be the same as drag leave. So I'll just kind of drop that here and say drop, which will turn that off. We're no longer above anything. So let's try that again. So we'll drop countdown, we'll drop tower, and then I'll bring launch at, and you can see now it's showing me where it's going to insert, which is a really nice piece of user functionality. So if I drop it on countdown, we know we're going above there. Okay, so that looks really good. The only other thing I think that we'd like to do is, let's refresh this. So if I bring this over, you can see that it's still over here on the left. And it would be nice for this to be like a ghost, right? So if we drop it, we kind of want the old one to be a ghost. So the way we can do that is we can just add the drag handler here and say, or the drag start. We can say on drag start, and we can say equals drag start. And if I look at drag start, we're just going to set a new property as like is dragging, right? And this is going to refer to the one that we're dragging before. So this is going to be true. We'll start it off, let is dragging equal to false. So now I know if I'm in the middle of dragging this. And if I am in the middle of dragging it, we're going to add just a opacity, right? We're just going to sort of make it, you know, a lot less. And we'll just set that equal to is dragging. So if we're dragging, we're just going to change the opacity of the one before. So if I bring launch tower over, you can see it's now a ghost over there, which is great. And then, of course, it's removed based on what we did earlier. So, you know, sort of nice and easy there. This also works inside. Oh, look at that. They're going away. Okay, so we've got another bug here where we're dropping in on themselves. So we can take a look at that next. All right, so the bug where that we just found where we drop it and it goes away, that bug is because we did all of the work for the assign drop function, but we did none of that work in the to do drop function. So again, after I do this, the next step is to clean this all up. So don't worry. But what we need to do is copy basically the entire content of the assign drop and put it in here, and then change it to be the other guy. So in this case, we need to take every time that we see tasks assigned and change these to be tasks to do. So we can say tasks to do. I know I could do the refactor, but I just want to, sometimes I like to do it individually just so I can see it. This will be moved, task assigned, and then tasks. Tasks to do has a capital D, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Okay. To do, and then this is tasks assigned. Tasks assigned. Okay. We can definitely clean this up. Absolutely. I can already see that we should just do this at the end, but I'm just gonna get that working, and then we're gonna optimize, clean this up. So now I can, oh, it still goes away. Let's see. So this removes it from both. Drop target. Tasks to do. Dot find. Is that the right one? Yeah, that's fine. Drop target tasks assigned. That is wrong. It needs to find the index of tasks to do, not tasks assigned. Okay. So I drop countdown. Okay. It's not exactly, we have an issue with the style, but it didn't go away. So if I can move it around. Okay, it's here now. It has not gone away, but we also have not removed that style. Okay, so I think we just need a drag end event as well as the drop. So I'm guessing the drop is not fired in that situation. So let's add we have a drag start. Let's add a drag end event, drag end, and we're gonna have that do the opposite of this. So drag start, drag end, and we'll set is dragging to false here as well. Let's see if that takes care of it. There we go. So now I can move countdown around all the way up the list. Sorting works. I can move it over here. I can move it back. And both lists are now working. We've got all that good to go. So the next step is we've done a few things kind of messy here. Like one is that we don't need all these tiny little functions up here. We actually can do those inline here very easily. So we're going to clean that up. And then as you can tell, we've got a lot of duplicate code here between these drop functions are almost the same. And a lot of these are almost the same. So what we can do next is optimize this so that we have basically a master function that knows how to do it for both of them instead of having each one be individual. While in some cases this might be more readable, it's a bit hard to maintain that these functions are almost doing the same thing. So let's clean that up. All right, so we've completed all of the functionality, but we've done it in a bit of a messy way. We've been very verbose about everything, and we've done some, one-line functions. And Svelte has some things that can make that a bit nicer. So, a couple things we want to do here. We don't want to have two drop functions that are basically identical, and we also let me just move these around here. We also don't need to have all these individual little small functions that are just hanging around. We also don't need two of these dragging functions since, again, they're almost identical. Same goes with the task itself. We have all these little tiny functions, which, maybe you like that and prefer not having any code down here, but I actually would like to sort of abstract all this functionality out and just keep it right here because Svelte can do these one-line things. So, for example, instead of drag enter being just this, we could say, instead of making a function call, we could just straight equals true, right? And then we don't have to do then we don't need this, right? And then we can do it again. So drag leave is setting it to false. So like that. The drop is gonna set this to false. And then the start is gonna set this to true. Is dragging equal to true. And then drag end is going to set it to false. So we can do that, and then we can get rid of all of these functions. And so to me, again, this may be personal preference. To me, this is a little bit cleaner than having all those things abstracted. Likewise, if we go back to our main here, we can do the same thing for this. So here we have to do drag enter, which is just setting this same thing. So instead of doing that, we can say that equals to true, and then we don't need this function anymore. And then drag leave equals to false. Then we don't need this function anymore. The drag over is just to prevent default. So here we could just say e dot prevent default. Right? So you don't need that. We also have to do that drag over down here. Easy. And then we've got these ones. So this is drag enter for is dragging assigned. So drag enter, which is here, equals to true. And then I'm just going to copy that, paste it here, equals to false. Awesome. So now I don't need these. So again, I've just removed a bunch of code, right? Which is super helpful, and the whole thing still works. So now that I've done that, we've got two that are a little bit more advanced. We've got two dragging functions and our drop function. So one thing we have going for us for our drop is that if we could just call the drop, not the drop, let's do the drop in a minute. If we could just call the drag function and tell it which task list to use, then I wouldn't need to have different ones. Like this to-do dragging is assuming I'm getting tasks to do. But down here, I kind of already know that because I'm in this block. So instead of saying to-do dragging, what I can actually do is I can actually call a function and call to-do dragging. And I can send it. Well, first we'll send it the e-event, so we still have it. But then we're going to send it the task list that we care about. So in this case, this is the tasks to do, right? We can do that because we know we're in this list, so we already know which list we care about. Instead of calling it to-do dragging, we can just call it dragging, right? So we can make a new function called dragging. I'll just make a new one up here. Function dragging, and that takes drag event, and it takes a list. So we'll just call that I don't know what we want to call that. we'll just call it tasks, and that's going to be task item, right? So now if we take this chunk of functionality and put it in here, it's not tasks to do anymore. Now it's tasks, right? Because we're actually passing in which list we care about. So I can actually use that exact same procedure for the other one too. So I could take that on drag event like that, and I can use it down here. And then instead of passing tasks to do, I can pass in tasks assigned. And now I'm able to use the exact same function for both of these, and I don't need that anymore. And I'm able to use this single one, right? So let's just verify that it all still works. So we can move countdown over, we can move it back, we can put it in a particular position, we can move mix fuel over, we can move launch at 0, move that back. So it's all still working, which is great. And the last thing we need to do is this drop function. And again, these are almost the same, but the big difference is that which list it is that it affects is different. So in this case, we're looking in the tasks to do. So again, we can use the exact same technique that we just did and have a singular drop function and pass it the list. So we could just say function drop drag event, right? And then let's go ahead and just change it down here. So for the drag event here, instead of to do drop, we can just say drop. Well, let's pass it to event, and then we'll say drop, drop, and then we're going to pass it the event. And then here we know that we are doing the to-do list, so we can say tasks to do, just like we did before. And then for the to-do, or for the drop now, over here, instead we're going to say tasks : task item, right? So same thing. Now we can take this whole block of functionality for the drop, and we can move it in here. And then instead of doing tasks assigned, we can just say tasks. And this is doing both anyway, so that doesn't matter. So that's that one, that's tasks, that's tasks. This is just resetting it, and this is resetting both of them, and this is resetting one. So we can actually just make that a little bit easier. And we can just take this, which is both of them, and take this one away and just do them both at the end no matter what, because we just care about re-rendering them. Like, it doesn't matter what happened, just re-render them, right? So now this function works for both situations already, because we're removing from both, so that's handled, we're re-rendering both, so that's handled, and we're passing in which list we actually want to operate on. So in this case, we're operating on whatever list you happen to be passed in. And so now I can just use this singular drop event for both. So I don't need this function to do drop anymore, and I don't need this function assign drop anymore. These big ones are gone, and there's no more repeat code in that way. And so here I can call this drop function on drop. Here I can do the same thing on drop, and instead of tasks to do, we'll say tasks assigned. Save that. Let's test it out. And we have a bug. So let's figure out what that bug is. Okay, so that bug is because of how we are adding it to the end. In this case, this is setting a local variable, which is this tasks here, and that's not what we want to do. We actually want to add to the main array. This is just modifying this local scope tasks. So we actually want to take tasks and not redefine it here in this scope, but we want to add to it. So we actually want to push tasks dragging instead. I know that this almost seems like it's the same thing, but it's not. This is redefining this local one, and this is taking this reference to tasks and pushing something onto it. We're not redefining it anywhere. So that would affect it correctly now. So if I refresh that, and now I can bring countdown over and it works, and I can bring launch tower over and it works, and I can rearrange them or put launch at 0 over there, right? So now it all works again with one single function, and it's way cleaner now, way less code than when we started. We don't have any very specific things for each side. It's all very generic drag, drop functions. And again, your personal preference if you want to sort of put these Boolean sets in the code or not. But to me, when you're reading the code, you're like, what does the drop do? If it's a function, I got to go find the function. If it's here, I know what it does immediately. So preference on that. But we've cleaned this up. We've made this drag and drop work. We've covered a lot of different topics here, so hope you enjoyed it. I know that you can get even more into drag drop, and one of the future videos that we're going to do is actually do this in real time with other players on the screen, so that you'll be able to see what other players have dragged and dropped. So there'll be some more interesting things about shared state when we get into that. But for now, just some basics on drag and drop.